Uh, how do we effectively report a message? There are a few guidelines that we should follow. The first one is that once we start speaking about a topic, our messages should be clear and direct. If I'm discussing with my students, for example, how to write a paper or a seminar, I have to tell them how long it should be. I should say it should be between 5 and 7 pages. I shouldn't just say it should be medium length. If I'm speaking about how many sources they should use, how many books they should read, I should tell them use at least 3 books. I shouldn't just say, okay, just use so many as you feel appropriate, because one of them will use 1 book and another one will use 10 books. It won't be the same quality of the paper, and it's my fault because I haven't given a clear and direct message. Then, if I'm discussing a situation that I'm involved in, for example, I'm discussing with a business partner, and I'm discussing something that went wrong, I should say my belief is, or my emotions in this situation are such. We should include ourselves when we are actually involved. So it's sometimes we start speaking like from a pedestal, so we're telling everybody else what they made, where they made a mistake, what they did wrong. But if we're part of this situation, a far better approach is to just tell them how we feel and where do we see our role in this situation. The next guideline is that if I start speaking to somebody, let's say that I'm still discussing my the seminar paper with my students, I have to make sure to give them all the necessary information. So I should tell them how long the paper should be, how many sources they should use, how many references, how to quote the references, which quoting style to use, for example. I should also be very careful about using professional terms. We all use professional terms. Sport is a situation where there are so many professional or words that somebody that's not from this area would not be able to understand. Sometimes we use too many professional terms in order to appear like we know something, but if we want understanding from the people that we're discussing with, we should be careful to explain them. So it would be wrong for me to speak of internal motivation with you unless I explain that this is a motivation that is based on achieving personal goals, on having fun, on enjoying myself. If I would just speak about internal motivation without the explanation of what that actually is, I wouldn't be getting through to you. You wouldn't be able to understand me in the same manner. Then also there is an issue of what is fact and what is my opinion of the fact. Sometimes coaches conclude that when an athlete does not come regularly to practices, that they lack motivation. Perhaps something else has gone wrong. The fact is that they're not attending practices, but it's their opinion that they're not motivated. Something else could be causing this absence from practice. For example, they could have problems at school. There could be financial situations involved. Perhaps there could be an emotional issue that is preventing them from coming to practice, and we should be very careful to differentiate what is a fact and what is my interpretation of the fact. Also, for example, if I'm discussing as a coach a situation with an athlete, let's say that I'm analyzing their performance in a competition, I should stick to analyzing the competition on this particular competition. I shouldn't go back to how it was 2 weeks ago or how this is going to go in a couple of weeks unless I repair a mistake or two. So when I'm speaking about today's competition, it's all about today. Let's not jump in time let's not include other issues that are not important at this moment. Also, it's very important to give the message as soon as possible. If I see somebody doing something wrong, I should discuss it as soon as possible. Sometimes we wait until the next day, or perhaps we discuss, give a criticism after the lesson. So one of my students could be acting out during my lecture, and it's okay for me to say, please let's not do this at this very moment. Or I should take him aside and speak to him as soon as possible. If I wait for 2 hours until I've finished with my lecture, he probably or she didn't forget what happened. However, the emotional attachment is gone, and I should give my ideas, I should give criticism the moment something happens, not wait too long. Sarcasm means that we're able to make fun of very dark topics, and we're not able to do that up until the age of 12, and coaches and people who guide or lead groups should never use sarcasm unless they've tested how the people in the group understand it. It's the same with humor, dark humor. So we should dose the humor very, very carefully and check for responses when we're trying to make a joke. About insults, we should not use them. It's not okay to tell somebody who's trying hard, who's doing their best, that they're lazy, that they're not intelligent, or that they're lacking something. So if we're guiding somebody in a process, either this is a sport or perhaps a school setting or a company, we should avoid all sorts of insults. When somebody does something good, we should give praise to them in front of the entire group and set them as an example. But if we want to criticize somebody, we should do that in private. We should always praise more, so people should know that they're doing well, that they're advancing, that they're trying hard, and there should be much more praise than criticism. In the long run, this has a big influence on one's self-image. If somebody always hears just criticism, their self-image is going to be bad. And sometimes this happens with athletes. They could be quite successful in competitions, but if their coaches keep telling them, you're not doing good, this is wrong, this is bad, they're going to develop low self-image, and in a while they won't be able to show what they have in themselves on competition. Also, when there's progress pointed out, sometimes we forget to show or praise people for advancing, for doing something better, for improving. Sometimes we just take that for granted, in the sense we should be better. This is the way things go. No. When somebody tries hard and when somebody is really working hard, they will advance, they will be better, and they've earned a praise. So point it out, please. Also, sometimes it's important to repeat messages. If something is crucial, if, for example, I want my students to use a certain type of quoting in their seminar papers, I should repeat, use this and this quoting style or referencing style. And maybe I'll have to tell it 5 times, maybe I'll have to repeat it 10 times, but it's better to repeat 10 times than to say, I already told you that. Because somebody could not, maybe didn't hear me, somebody perhaps didn't understand what I was saying, somebody might be unfamiliar with this referencing style, and I have to repeat that in order to get through to as many people in the group as possible. It's also quite important to check if people understand what I'm saying. So if I'm giving instructions, I should check for understanding. I should ask people, do you understand what I want you to do? I can ask somebody to recap my ideas or my instructions. If this is a motor task, I could tell somebody in a group, show me what you have to do. It takes confidence from the lecturer or from the coach to ask for feedback, because if the feedback is yes, we understand, then it's okay. But if the feedback is no, we did not understand, we have to be able to give a different explanation, and this requires a lot of knowledge. And it's been shown in psychology that confident coaches frequently ask for feedback, whereas coaches which lack in confidence don't ask for feedback that much. Once we get to a communication situation, we have three options. The first one is that everybody is okay. So I'm happy about something that happened. My coach is happy with the competition. Everybody's satisfied, or both business partners are satisfied with the idea. The communication is going to be smooth. So just by taking into account what we just spoke of, everything will be fine. However, there could arise a situation where my partner in communication has a problem. This partner might be experiencing negative emotions, and they're coming to us to speak to us about this situation, and we can use the technique called active listening, but also we could have a problem. So we could be ourselves experiencing negative emotions, and we can use the technique called I sentences or I structures and please. This technique can also be used when we see that somebody else has a problem and we're trying to get more information about this problem from them. Both of these techniques, both active listening and I sentences, were developed by Thomas Gordon. He was one of the pioneers of good communication in a school setting, and he saw that for better communication between teachers and pupils, you can get the pupils to learn better, to be more active in school, and thus to learn more. It is also very appropriate to use those techniques in a business setting, in sports settings, and we're going to start out by taking a look at active listening. This is a technique that has three parts. The first one is we can confirm what other people are telling us. So let's say you have somebody coming to tell you that they have a problem, that they need more time to finish their task. And they start out by speaking to you, and you're not quite sure what they're trying to tell you. So you can just start by listening to them and saying, okay, I understand, now and then. And this would be confirming that you're listening to them, that you're active in this conversation, but that you're not saying something because you don't really know what to say. Of course, it's very difficult to keep saying yes, okay all the time, so we can also use paraphrasing as the second stage. So somebody else is telling us that they have a lot of time, that they lack time, that they have a lot to do, so we're saying, it seems like you're very busy. And my partners will say, yes, and you know what else? And they're going to understand this as an invitation to explain further their situation. Only then, after my partner has explained his or her situation well, we continue with asking a question. Those first two stages are there in order to prevent us from just giving a solution or just trying to help straight out. Sometimes we like to give ideas, we like to give suggestions to others. And sometimes somebody could be explaining us something and we'll just jump to the conclusion or to proposing a solution without even knowing all the details that we would need to know. So this technique is very useful for showing people that we want to hear from them and that we need more information because we don't really understand what it is that they're asking us. While we're listening actively, we should also show interest on a nonverbal level, which means that it's not okay for me to say, yes, it seems like you're very busy, and stare out the window while I'm doing this. We need to respond to our partners in communication. So this partner of mine comes and tells me that they have a problem, and I'm actively listening. And I will get them to explain the situation, and only then will I be able to provide a good input as far as solutions go. But when I have a problem and I'm trying to give somebody information, or perhaps trying to criticize them, but I would like to avoid hurting their feelings, I can use I sentences, or as Gordon also called them, I structures. These are structures that show openness. We express our opinions, and we also give some space or some room for the other person to object to what we're saying. It also has a threefold structure. The first is we point out an actual behavior. Then we point out actual consequences of this behavior. And then we add an emotion or an opinion of this situation. An example would be this. You weren't listening to me, so this is an actual behavior. And you made a mistake. Actual consequences. And it makes me very sad. So this is my emotion added to this. This sort of functions as an invitation into a discussion. It avoids us from speaking too loudly. We cannot say this in an aggressive manner, whilst criticism normally can be perceived as something quite aggressive. If I'm trying to tell my students that I want them to listen to me, I could do that by, would you please listen? Or I could go, you're not listening to me, and I'm afraid that you might not understand the topic, and it makes me sad. This other version is more or less an invitation for them to participate, whilst the first one is basically being aggressive towards them. This is as far as effective listening and reporting goes from my side. Now it's your turn to do some homework. First, you will write down about an experience which you will have when you will try to have a conversation about a troublesome issue with a friend or a partner or a coworker, and try to use active listening and I sentences in this conversation. And then write how you felt during this conversation and whether it was a successful conversation. Again, you will have a trip to your closest library and read through Thomas Gordon's Teacher Effectiveness Training. Browse through the techniques, browse through I sentences and active listening, and then again solve the quiz. Good luck, and we'll speak again once you've completed these tasks.